Section 16, Advertising Restrictions. Today's Fair Housing Rules and Regulations, 2026 Standard. Introduction, When Words Become Violations. In the last section, we focused on the rules of advertising, what must be included, and how to properly structure your marketing. Now we take the next step and tighten the lens even further. This section is about restriction, and more specifically, how the words you choose in advertising can create fair housing violations, even when your intentions are good. This directly ties back to Section 3, where we discussed how modern discrimination is often subtle, and Section 15, where we established that advertising is one of the most highly regulated and enforced areas in real estate. In 2026, agents are not just marketers. They are communicators operating within a legal framework where every word matters. From listing agreement to marketing message, every advertisement begins with a listing contract. When a seller hires you, the agreement outlines the property details, price, and conditions of sale. From there, you create what is known as sales material, anything used to generate interest in the property, including flyers, social media posts, emails, videos, and MLS descriptions. However, one of the biggest mistakes agents make is assuming that everything in the listing agreement can be marketed freely. In reality, your advertising must comply not only with the contract, but also with fair housing laws and agency obligations. This is where restriction begins. The fair housing line, describing property versus describing people. Let's bring this to life through a real-world scenario. A new agent is excited about her first listing and writes an ad describing the home as being in a traditional neighborhood and perfect for newlyweds with no more than 2 children, while also mentioning proximity to a specific ethnic community and local churches. At first glance, this may seem like good marketing, but legally it is full of violations. Each phrase crosses a line. Traditional neighborhood implies a preference tied to race or culture. Newlyweds and 2 children restrict familial status. Mentioning a specific ethnic group ties into national origin. Referencing churches implies religious preference. None of these statements directly deny housing, but they suggest who the ideal buyer is, and that is exactly what fair housing laws prohibit. This connects directly back to everything you've learned so far. Discrimination today is rarely obvious. It's implied. The correct approach: neutral, property-focused language. Now let's look at how that same property should be advertised. A compliant version would read, 3-bedroom home located in a quiet neighborhood, close to transportation and shopping. Property needs repairs and is priced to sell. Notice the difference. The focus is entirely on the property, its features, condition, and location. There is no mention of people, no assumptions about buyers, and no reference to protected classes. This is the standard in 2026. The rule is simple but powerful. Describe the property, not the person who should live there. Location descriptions, a subtle but critical risk. One of the most overlooked areas of advertising restriction is how agents describe location. There is a fine line between geographic and demographic references. Saying a property is near Chinatown may be acceptable if it is the official name of the area. However, describing it as being near a Chinese neighborhood shifts the focus to ethnicity and becomes a violation. The same applies to references involving religion, culture, or community demographics. In today's market, safe location descriptions include proximity to schools, transportation, shopping centers, and recognized geographic landmarks. Anything that implies the type of people who live in the area creates risk. Misleading advertising, where agency law comes in. Fair housing is not the only concern. Advertising restrictions also come from the law of agency, which requires agents to act honestly and in the best interest of their client. In the earlier example, the statement, "owner willing to accept offers below asking price," created a separate violation because it committed the seller to a position that may not have been authorized in the listing agreement. This is a critical point in 2026. Misleading advertising is not just unethical, it is legally actionable. Agents must ensure that every statement is accurate, authorized, and does not create false expectations. A phrase like "price to sell" is acceptable because it suggests motivation without making a specific commitment. The Equal Housing Opportunity Standard. To reinforce compliance, the Equal Housing Opportunity Policy and logo were introduced to create consistency in advertising. This serves as a visual and written commitment that housing is available to all individuals regardless of protected class status. While the logo itself is a tool, the real compliance comes from the language used in the advertisement. The logo does not protect you if the wording violates the law. Advertising yourself, not just the property. Another layer of restriction comes into play when agents advertise their services. Fair housing principles extend beyond property marketing and into personal branding. Agents must operate within the scope of their license and follow state-specific requirements for disclosures, including brokerage identification and licensing information. This ties back to earlier sections. Everything you communicate to the public, whether about a property or your services, is regulated. Why these violations still happen. At this level, you may be wondering why agents still get in trouble. The answer is simple. Most violations come from trying to target a specific audience using casual or conversational language, making assumptions about buyers overpromising or exaggerating property features. In 2026, these risks are amplified by technology. Social media posts, digital ads, and online listings can be screenshot, shared, and reported instantly. There is no taking it back once it's published. Bringing it all together, advertising with precision. This section ties together everything you've learned about fair housing and advertising. From understanding discrimination to applying legal standards in daily practice, the message is clear. Advertising is no longer just marketing, it is a legal communication tool. To stay compliant, every ad must be accurate, neutral, property-focused, free of protected class references, consistent with the listing agreement. Because in today's real estate environment, success is not just about getting attention, it's about doing it the right way. Online discussion. Question 1. Why is it risky to describe the ideal buyer in an advertisement? Answer: because it implies a preference or limitation based on protected classes, which violates fair housing laws. Question 2. What is the safest way to describe a property's location? Answer: by using neutral geographic references such as landmarks, transportation, and shopping, rather than demographic or cultural descriptions. Question 3. How does the law of agency impact advertising? Answer: it requires agents to be truthful and not commit the seller to terms that are not authorized in the listing agreement.